Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 people who amazingly survived getting shot in the head.
Number 10. Malala Yousafzai is undeterred from advocating for women's education by Taliban bullet. In 2009, Yousafzai became a blogger for the BBC when she was only 11 years old. She was in a uniquely qualified and dangerous position since she was living in and seeking an education in the Swat Valley in Pakistan, a location that has been under the control of the Taliban since 2009. As Biography.com reported, the danger of that for her was made all too real in 2012 when a hail of gunfire during an attack injured several girls with her and sent a bullet through her skull and down along her spine. The wound also caused swelling in her brain, necessitating the removal of part of her skull. It was too advanced of an operation for the local medical services, and she needed to be flown to a hospital in Birmingham, UK, as reported by The Telegraph. Yousafzai's statements after fully recovering from the shooting made her something of a modern icon. In 2014, she won the Nobel Peace Prize for her continued commitment to education for women despite nearly dying a particularly horrible death. But in the public consciousness, it was her appearance on television where she made the biggest impact. The most notable of these was when she was on The Daily Show, and she said that she did not wish any violence on the person who shot her, but that if she were confronted by him again, she would say that she would want an education for his children. Even comedian Jon Stewart was left speechless by that. Number 9. Patrick Ireland survives shotgun shrapnel passing through his brain. On the 20th of April 1999, Patrick Ireland was a victim of one of the most famous mass shootings in American history, the Columbine shooting. One of 37 people shot during that tragedy, he would acquire a period of infamy himself as the boy in the window, who, after taking a shot in the leg and brain, limped to a second-story window he fell out of to be caught by a SWAT team, according to NBC News. In Dave Cullen's harrowing book on the event, Columbine, the shot that passed through his brain made it so that Ireland was still lucid and had extreme difficulty speaking, even saying his own name came with a stutter. The initial prognosis was that he would not survive the injury. Still, Ireland not only survived, but effectively fully recovered, save for a slight limp. After graduating, Christian Science Monitor reported that he went into the field of financial services. Dave Cullen said that Ireland's ability to cope with and move past the event was the most inspirational thing he saw related to the shooting. Number 8. Paul Kern survives headshot, loses ability to sleep. During the First World War, the Hungarian Kern was a soldier in the Central Powers who was stationed on the Russian front. In 1915, a Russian soldier shot him in the right temple, driving a bullet through his frontal lobe and back out. Kern didn't merely survive, but recovered quickly. After leaving the service, he got a job with the government and, by all accounts, functioned normally except for one thing. In the 40 years following his injury until his passing in 1955, the Milwaukee Chronicle reported that Kern was not able to sleep. He sought extensive medical aid, tried numerous unsophisticated remedies such as hypnotism and alcohol. Alcohol in particular backfired by making him less sleepy than ever, and still had to content himself with just 2 hours resting his eyes every night, according to National Geographic. So what did a man in Hungary, who needed only 2 hours sleep, do to pass the nights? Kern's nighttime habits for a while included going to cafes for his 8 daily meals, reading, then walking to the poorer districts to socialize with his friends that were forced into lives of sleeping in doorways. It was an interesting contrast between someone who was afflicted in an anomalous way and people afflicted in one of the worst and most common ways, especially at the time. Number 7. Tammy Sexton takes bullet through forehead, makes tea. People in shock brought on by grievous bodily harm will often do things that seem bizarre to everybody else. One of the most famous moments in the classic film Saving Private Ryan is a soldier picking his amputated arm up from the beach as blithely as if he's tying his shoes. And yet what Tammy Sexton of Jackson County, Mississippi did after she was shot seems so surreal and impossible, it sounds like an incident from a particularly strange cartoon. In 2009, Sexton's husband, on probation for domestic abuse, entered their home, shot his wife in the center of her forehead, then killed himself. When the police arrived, they found that she had since made some tea after being shot and offered them some. While it may seem as if she had been lobotomized to a degree, in fact, she made a borderline miraculous full recovery. Number 6. Jacob Miller spent decades with fragments in his face. In 1863, Miller was a Union soldier during the American Civil War, who on September 19, 1863, had the rotten luck to be present at the Battle of Chickamauga, one of the deadliest battles of the war. Like Tammy Sexton, he was shot by a musket in the middle of his forehead, and understandably, both his fellow troops and the enemy thought that he was dead. If they hadn't, he probably wouldn't have been able to get away from the battlefield after the fighting ended using his rifle as a crutch, eventually reaching a Union hospital. After waiting 9 months, the musket ball was finally removed from his forehead. 17 years after that, a chunk of lead fell out of his head. But even then, that wasn't the end, for another one fell out of his head 14 years after that. It hurt him for all of that time. Ultimately, he survived the wounds that really should have killed him for 54 years. Number 5. Richard Norris survived losing half his face to a shotgun shell. In 1997, for reasons he doesn't remember, according to a profile in GQ, 22-year-old Richard Norris accidentally discharged a shotgun shell into his face. He was at home, and his mother was close enough to him that parts of his face hit her. Though he survived against long odds, effectively half of his face was gone. Understandably, he had to have the mirrors taken out of his home and he wore a black mask when he went out. Around a decade later, his mother found out about a cutting-edge doctor named Eduardo Rodriguez who agreed to reconstruct her son's face. It was a very new surgical procedure, with Norris being only the third person to undergo it. It was a years-long process of grafting skin from other parts of Norris's body to his face and from cadavers that involved over a dozen surgeries. The surgeries culminated in the most elaborate facial reconstruction in human history, in an operation in 2012 that lasted 36 hours. In the end, Norris felt confident enough with his new face that after years of living in his parents' house, barely socializing, he went out and found a significant other. Number 4. Russian Terminator unfazed by bullet to his forehead. The details behind this video from Russia are scanty, but the images are certainly memorable. Reportedly dating back to a clash between Russian armed forces and Chechen rebels in 2000, it features a very crude field surgery performed on an anonymous soldier. What's been identified by The Independent as an AK-47 bullet is lodged in his forehead. One of his comrades comes and has to resort to prying it out with a pair of pliers. What makes this video compelling, instead of merely uncomfortable to watch, was the soldier's demeanor. Rather than showing any signs of being disturbed that he's just almost been killed or in pain because a bullet is being pried out of his head, he seems so calm he might as well be receiving a haircut. But rather than seeming like someone in shock, he turns to the camera and grins in a very lucid manner, smiling even a couple of times while his wound is squeezed to remove any potential shrapnel. He seems like the living embodiment of stereotypes about the toughness of Russian people. Number 3. Sgt Alastair McKinney survives Taliban sniper shot directly through his brain. Even this soldier from the 1st Battalion Royal Irish Regiment couldn't believe he'd survived his head injury after he emerged from a coma in 2005 at age 33. On a routine guard duty, he was hit by a Taliban sniper's bullet that hit him above his right eye and exited his skull above his right ear. It was reported that he had a 0.1% chance of surviving the wound. Sgt Alastair McKinney was at least fortunate enough not to remember the sensation of the bullet hitting him, just standing there in Pakistan one second, and the next he was in Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, UK. McKinney's recovery was not easy and straightforward like Paul Kern's. He got multiple infections while in hospital, including tuberculosis. He lost vision in the left side of both of his eyes. 3 years after the shooting, he was still in the care of his parents. McKinney still claimed that he wasn't bitter. After all, he was just very lucky to be alive. Number 2. Petra Anderson survives the Aurora shooting because of a brain abnormality. This woman was 22 years old in 2012 when she was sitting in the Colorado Theater for one of the other most famous mass shootings in American history. The gunman fired 3 shotgun pellets into her arm and 1 up her nose and into her brain. The pellet would have torn through vital areas easily, but Anderson had an irregularity of the cerebellum that would prove an unlikely lifesaver. She had a small channel of fluid that ran through her brain that no one had any idea was there because it was a completely benign aspect of her anatomy, which many people have. Instead of just being more grey matter that the projectile would tear through, the pellet moved through the brain without inflicting any severe damage. As a result, Anderson not only survived, but fled the scene under her own power before going into intensive care for a week. After she recovered, Colorado Public Radio reported that she became a music composer. Number 1. Toddler survives self-inflicted gunshot to the head. Children getting their hands on guns and accidentally shooting themselves and others is surprisingly common. The Washington Post reports that in 2015, 265 children in America accidentally shot people. So it was not anomalous when 3-year-old Darnell Mundy shot himself in the head in Miami, Florida on the 4th of August 2015. What would have been anomalous would have been for him to survive, as one of the nurses told Darnell Mundy's parents when he was brought in. According to CNN, he shot himself in the middle of the face and the bullet exited out the left side of the back of his head. A portion of his skull had to be removed because of the swelling. He fell into a coma for 3 weeks, but thankfully recovered enough that in 3 months he was able to return home. He was in a wheelchair while he regains the ability to use the right side of his body.
So I really hope you found that video interesting. Some of those were quite amazing entries. If you did, please do hit that like button below and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We put out brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right, a couple of other videos that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one. And thank you for watching.